Hey guys, right now I'm in Turиньsко and let's go check out the church. So the church that we're going to is original church. It was built in the 1800s, I think like around 1801, 1803. And that's the church where my great-grandmother got married and where my grandmother was baptized. So let's go check it out. Stairs to the church. All right. All right, so this church is Orthodox, and although this church is Orthodox, and although that this church was built in like 1801 or 1803, it was not the first church in Turиньsко. Actually, it was the second, because the first one was built sometime before that, and then eventually burned down, and then they built this one. Now, as you can see over here on the right, we have a bell tower. And that's where they would go inside over here and ring the bell. And what I was told was that this bell tower is about 22 meters tall. So say roughly in feet, that would be like, say, 66 feet. I mean, my math could be a little bit off, but just to put things in perspective like that, say 66 feet, 70 feet, something like that. And also what I was told was that this bell tower is the tallest bell tower in all of either Lemko or in the Carpathian region over here. So now over here, we got the steps to the church. And what I was told by my mom was her grandma, so meaning my great-grandmother, sometimes there'd be so many people going to church over here that not everyone would fit inside. A lot of people would actually have to stand outside of the church. And also, not sure if maybe this was like a tradition for the whole village, but I remember my mom telling me that her grandma was telling her when my mom was a little kid was that they would walk to church barefoot because they normally didn't wear shoes back in the village back in those times, and once they would right before they would get inside the church, that's when they would put their nice like Sunday shoes on. So some good news and some not so good news. Good news is we can go in the church. The bad news is I can't film in the church, but if you want to take a quick look of how the church looks like, here's a photo of it. Now, this church is an Orthodox church, and it is under the jurisdiction of UNESCO. So basically, of what I understand is the Polish government, in order to bring like tourists to come into this region, they had this church go under UNESCO. Like it's like a World Heritage, and it's like a World Heritage site. I'm not sure exactly the correct terminology for it, but basically it's protected. And because it's under UNESCO, they're able to get funding for renovations for the church. So as you can see, the color of this wood is different than the color of this wood on the outside, and that's because the church behind me in the past few years recently got renovated. Now, not everything got renovated, it's more so just the exterior and the roof. but like in the inside, the inside is still pretty much the same. The floors are 200 years old, and I don't know. It's kind of cool and kind of gives you goosebumps when you walk inside there, and you just know that that your ancestors walked in that church. So it was kind of a surreal moment. Yeah. Anyway, let's go check out some more stuff. So over here, it looks like we have more of a newer cemetery. Cemetery over here. Here's Orthodox cross, and it basically says on top, you might not be able to see it, but it says 1,000 years since the baptism of Kievan Rus from 988 to 1988. So I take it that this cross was erected in 1988 for the 1,000-year anniversary of the baptism of the conversion to Christianity in Kievan Rus. Now, in this church, maybe we could get another angle of it. Let's see. Now, before I said that this church at one time, especially before Akcja Wisła, that there would be so many people in this village that people would have to be standing outside on the steps right outside. But nowadays there's about 3 families that still go to this church, and so that accounts for, say, about 10 to 15 people. And so today's Saturday right now, and I was hoping that I could find out if they had a liturgy, like a church liturgy tomorrow, and I would have come here to check it out, and to be here. But unfortunately, they're not having a liturgy tomorrow, because tomorrow is going to be a festival in Zinderanova called Одвиджаня. So the parish from Turinьsко are going to be going to Zinderanova tomorrow for church. And what I was also told was that the priest who comes here to Turиньsко to serve at the church, so he lives in Komancha, and he serves 3 parishes currently. So on a given Sunday, he'll serve first in Komancha, Komancha's just a few villages over, so it's not far. And then he'll come over here to serve in Turиньsко, and then he drives about 45-50 minutes to Zinderanova and does his liturgy over there. So that's that. So let's keep on walking. Now, I forgot to mention that this church is named after Saint Michael the Archangel. So there we go. So now, okay, so here's probably a better angle how you can see the church, especially now you can see the definitely contrast in one frame with the original, the 1800s wood, with the wood that's been put in place just recently in the past few years. Now here we have some gravesite. We have some gravestones over here. As you can see, not a lot, but just a few. Traditionally, in Turиньsко, maybe this was also in other villages, the cemetery wasn't always right next to the church. Sometimes it would be further away, like closer to the woods or the edge of property. But in this case, there's a cemetery where there's at least a few graves closer to the church. Now, I mentioned before that this is not the original church, meaning, yes, this church was built in like 1801, 1803, but it was not the first church built in Turиньско. The first church was built, I want to say sometime in the 1600s. I don't have that number on me right now, but it was actually not built in this location. The original church, it was over here. So let's take a quick look. So this is the new church, the current church. And if you look through this gate, now the original church stood more or less in the same location as that yellow building. But after some time, about around 1800s, 1801, it burned down. So you guys might be asking yourselves, if the original church stood that way behind me, why did they build the new one here? Now, the story goes is that there was an icon that survived the fire in the original church, and that church was of the Virgin Mary, and it was found at the location of where this church is. And the people, the villagers in Turиньско, they took that as a sign, as this is where we should build a new church. And that's what they did. Now, what I also found out today was, what I found out was that, as was like other villages, not just in Lemko, but all parts of, I guess you could say, Europe or Eastern Europe, or like Central Europe, villages had like manors and like estates. So I guess maybe that came from like feudalism. Maybe that's where it originated from. But there used to be like owners of Turиньско. So for example, like now, for example, at home, like you own your house, but back then you didn't necessarily own a house. You sometimes lived on what we call like the pan's property, like the lord's property. And apparently, more or less, where the pan, or like the owner, whether it's the owner of the whole village or owner of of just a really big property in the village, was where that brown orange building is over there. Yeah. So that's Turиньsко. That's how the church looks like. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it.